Greetings, everyone. This is Mike Riley, the voice of Ironman. And this is the Old School Tri Show with my Kiwi mates Cameron Harper and Brian Ashby. The show that talks about all things triathlon, old and new. We're powered by Ansco Foods, bringing you nutrition and good health from New Zealand's beef and lamb. Thanks for listening, everyone. Enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome along to another edition of the Old School Tri Show, brought to you by our great friends at Ansco Foods. And today, Brian, well, you look at these people and you think to yourself, how good are these guys going to be? And today's guest just definitely does not disappoint.
Well, it's remarkable because this particular guest came in at a time when Ironman New Zealand was in transition. Excuse the pun, not a bad pun. Has shifted from Auckland to Taupo. I think everyone who's had the letter B featuring strongly in their name were the rock stars then. DeBoom, Brown, the Balancers, and Lisa Bentley, our guest today. There's so much more to her story because cystic fibrosis loomed large.
Ansco Foods is proud to be the new naming partner of Ironman New Zealand, ensuring every stroke, pedal and stride is powered by the best nature has to offer. Ansco Foods is on a mission to bring nutrition and good health from New Zealand's finest beef and lamb. Ansco Foods, putting the iron in Ironman with New Zealand's finest beef and lamb. Visit anscofoods.com/Ironman to find out more.
Well, when Lisa Bentley was racing in Taupo, it was a transitional time, as I mentioned in the introduction, a transitional time for the event. Its long-term viability in a whole new venue, so that was a really big deal. The other big deal, of course, was had a supporting charity in the form of cystic fibrosis. And Lisa, that's an area that I guess is very dear to you. So to that end, before we start talking about Ironman New Zealand and coming to New Zealand and racing, let's talk about your early sporting days as a girl growing up in Canada. And I understand you were sort of diagnosed with cystic fibrosis a little bit later in life. So just tell us a wee bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, I wasn't diagnosed till I was 20, and it's a childhood, it's genetic. So you could be diagnosed at birth if there's screening done. But as a child, I just was a sick kid. So I was always on antibiotics, and pharmacist was always warning us that, your daughter's been on antibiotics for, the whole winter. And it just, that was the solution. And I also was a very allergic child. So I don't think people could sort of see the difference between this is an allergy thing, this is a chest infection. Frequently I would cough up blood, but there were no alarm bells. And it wasn't until my sister, actually, who's older than I am, got sick. And they were trying to figure out what was wrong. And they tested for all kinds of things. And they eventually said, let's just do a sweat chloride test, which is the test for cystic fibrosis. And it came back positive. And therefore, genetically, all my brothers and sisters had to get checked. And as it turned out, 3 out of 4 of us siblings had CF. And so that was a big change really in our life. I mean, for me, I think the biggest change was now I can get antibiotics at work because there's certain ones for people with CF. But thankfully, I was also in university, so I was a bit indestructible. I'm a kid at university living away from home, so nothing's going to beat me. And that was also when I started to do triathlon. So I didn't want to use it as an excuse. I didn't want to tell people. I just kind of kept it to myself, went on antibiotics because I didn't want to have people interested in me as an athlete just because I had CF. So for the longest time, I just kind of hid it and didn't do much with it. But I still got sick. I remember going to the Pan American Games in Argentina in 1995 and, couldn't even run around the track once. I was so sick and I was on a whole slew of antibiotics. And so it definitely affected my life. And, but then I saw Ironman and I wanted to do an Ironman. So I started Olympic distance, Pan American Games, national teams wanted to do an Ironman, started in 97, did Ironman Canada. And then came to New Zealand in 99, came in third, came back in 2000, finally won one. And I was so happy. And it wasn't really until 2001, when I came back the second time to New Zealand, that I kind of thought, I'm really happy I won the race, of course, but I wasn't over the moon. And I thought, I think I'm supposed to be doing something with this. Like, there's got to be more than just a medal. And that was really when I realized, Lisa, I think there's a reason that you're winning races, and there's a reason you have cystic fibrosis. Maybe you should be like raising some awareness. Maybe your little world can bring hope to other kids. And I think at that stage I had, built my resume enough that I didn't have to feel like I was going to be in the shadow of this disease. It wasn't going to be Lisa Bentley cystic fibrosis. It was going to be Lisa Bentley, one-time Ironman champion. It has cystic fibrosis. And now I could do something with it. And that really spurred on to meeting Tracy Richardson, who
Yes.
lived in New Zealand. And
Yes.
I went back to New Zealand in 2002. And she said, hey, can we meet? I have 2 kids with CF. And this was in my heart. Now I had a reason to race. I had a reason never to quit. And I met Tracy and her 2 kids, and it was wonderful. I mean, it was a massive turning point in my life and really in my career to realize that my words, my actions could have an effect, because I just didn't take myself seriously enough. I obviously am not as inflicted with CF as some people. It's a deadly disease. People didn't live past 10 in the early days. And here I am running around in a bathing suit. I thought, I don't want to make a mockery of this. This is a serious disease. But then, I kind of realized that if people with CF meet one single human being with CF that's thriving, that's hope. It doesn't matter if they've got it doesn't matter how healthy they are. They have something I've got, and therefore I want to be like them. And that's how it was with Tracy's kids. They just wanted to talk to somebody else who had CF, who's on and off antibiotics, who's dealing with it. And, the advice wasn't, hey, go do a triathlon. The advice was, let's go for a walk. Let's join a team, whether it be soccer or baseball, or maybe it's no team. Maybe it's being the bat boy or bat girl, like whatever. But just, building that self-esteem and getting active. And then, of course, Tracy just took it to another level by then doing her Ironman herself and raising money for her charity. So it's we wonder, in a wonderful way, influenced each other. And I often say that there's no way that I would have had the career that I had if I didn't have CF. And it's a pretty bold statement when your lungs are your engine, but I had purpose, and the people I raced with maybe didn't. And so I was never quitting.
So, Lisa, sorry, I was just, how did you go from being a you described yourself as a quite sickly child on antibiotics. Was sport always a part of your family with your siblings and your parents? How did you go from being a sick child to be starting into sports?
Yeah, not really. I mean, we really weren't. It was more, we just were active kids. We did stuff, but I think exercise really did help. But well, of course I didn't know I had CF, but when I was in high school, I started to run, and I was on the track team. And then when I went to university, I wanted to make friends, so I joined the running team. And that happened all before I got diagnosed. And then I just kept running with it. And I mean, we do realize now the benefits of exercise with someone with CF, that clearly the exercise saved my life without me really knowing that it was saving my life. So it was really just something that I found that gave me another outlet. Sport really gave me another outlet, because I was so interested in getting a scholarship to university that I was like studying like crazy. And I would, wake up at 5 a.m. and study before school. And then I'd go to school and I'd study when I came home, because I really wanted to get a scholarship so I could go to university. And it was my math teacher, who was also the track coach, that said, why aren't you running track? And I said, I got to get a scholarship. And she said, you could do both. And I'm like, really? I said, I don't know about that. And she said, you come up for the track team. And if your math test isn't good, like isn't 95, like, that's where I was at, then I'll waive it, there's nothing to be afraid of. And sure enough, I was able to do both. So I was able to run track and do well at school, etc., which is a great thing. And yet it's also turned me into a terrible multitasker. So I can't ever do one thing at one time.
Outstanding, outstanding. And what were your was running your first sporting love? I mean, it sounds it the way you're sort of describing it now.
Yeah, it was just so easy to do, joining the cross country team, and we just do
Yeah,
laps and laps and laps. So it was, I don't think I always say I was never very talented at running or really any sport. Like I was a terrible ice, we have ice skating. I couldn't do
yeah,
that very well, and I just didn't have. I don't know. I mean, it was never an option to be on the basketball team or the volleyball team. I guess I really just didn't have that skill set. But running, it was like, oh, okay, I've got running shoes. I could run around, and so that's basically what I did. And then looked to do that when I went to university.
yeah. And fast forwarding, later on you're smacking out sub 3 hour marathons on the back of an Ironman. At what point did triathlon kick in then?
Yeah, triathlon kicked in university when I was injured as a runner. So the good
Mm,
old fashioned story of trying to make up for the running injuries by cycling and by swimming.
mm,
And so that's what I did in university. And then I met friends that said, hey, let's do a triathlon. And that was pretty much it. It was all about social and meeting people. And so I started doing triathlon in 1989. So that was in my second or third year university, and then kept doing triathlon and became a teacher and was still doing triathlon as an amateur. And then I thought, Lisa, you keep comparing yourself to the people who win. It's time to race as a professional, even though I was still going to work as a teacher. It was sort of like a local professional. And so then
mm.
I sort of took that route for a few years till 1999. And then I ended up resigning from teaching to be a full-time athlete.
Yeah.
Did you, Lisa? Did you take to swimming and cycling quite easily? Was that difficult for you, or are you just one of these people that's pretty much good at everything?
No, 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 no. It was hard. Swimming especially was hard because I didn't have the technique. I knew how to swim. My parents gave me swimming lessons when I was a kid just so I wouldn't drown. And so I knew how to swim, but the technique was very challenging. But I was at university, so I could go to the swim team and say, can I just like be in the hamburger lane with all the people that can't swim? And, gradually got better. But, back when I started, if you swam, a 23-minute 1.5K, that was a good swim. Now you got to swim 17 minutes. So it was a different level of sport as well. So finally, when I could swim like a 22-minute, 1.5 kilometer swim, now it was an Olympic sport, and now I was out the back again. So I was like,
Mm,
every time I improved, I had to, this sport took another leap. And so then Ironman kind of disguised my average swim a bit better. So, then and I got some swim coaching, and that helped a lot to learn how to swim properly and
Yeah.
efficiently. And then of course drafting, I could sometimes pull myself through to a 53-minute swim, which I think
mm,
is pretty decent as a really a non-swimmer. But
mm.
and biking, you just practice it enough and you are able to get better at it. So cycling came way easier. uh, the challenge for me was always technique, like being descending like crazy. Like that was never my forte. I was never allowed to ride a bike like that as a kid. There's a downhill, Lisa, get off your bike, walk your
Yeah,
bike down the hill.
yeah,
That
yeah,
was how I was raised. So
yeah.
that probably held me back a lot when I was racing, is not really racing at my limit. I raced at
Mm.
my personal limit, but you'd laugh if you were with me and going, you just threw $1,000 bills at your back because you just put your brakes on going down that hill. So
Yeah, yeah. So much of the 1990s and through your 20s, you were racing sort of Olympic distance and so on. Did you travel around a lot? Did you go offshore and race? Just tell us about your background in Olympic distance racing.
yeah, Olympic distance, I went to the World Championships. I raced in Manchester, England. I raced in New Zealand. New Zealand had the
Yep.
World Championships in
Yeah.
95,
Wellington?
I think. Yeah,
Was that
Yeah.
Wellington.
Wellington? Yeah,
Yeah,
Wellington.
yeah,
Yeah.
Windy Wellington. So I came to New Zealand then.
yeah.
And yeah, so I did get around, went to the Pan American Games in Argentina. And so yeah, I mean, I loved racing. It was when it changed to draft legal that now
Yeah.
all of a sudden I was out the back because I wasn't a good enough swimmer. So I would get out of the swim, and usually I could make up my time on the bike and the run, but now I couldn't because people were drafting and I was by myself. So that
Mm.
was when I decided I was going to change to Ironman because I just loved it. I think I went in my first half Ironman in the very early 90s and did did reasonably well because I just have that ability to hold my speed for a long time. Like I am certainly not a fast twitch athlete or power athlete. So, I can remember preparing for New Zealand, and a lot was done on the trainer because it's winter here in Canada. And I would ride for 5 hours on the trainer at 200 watts, which is a lot of watts for me. But if
Sorry, my internet just seems to have gone a bit haywire.
Yeah, same.
Are we back? I had a phone call coming in on this phone. I had to hang up on it. So can you hear me?
Yeah, got you now. Yeah, we just
Okay.
sometimes the internet goes a bit silly in this, and it finds its way back, and we come back and stuff. So that all works out fine. So, but it's interesting what you're saying. It's a similar story to what Cameron Brown was sort of saying at that change over time when it went to draft legal and so on. Just going through your sort of CV, there was a race that I'm not familiar with, and it sounds as though it was one of the first races where you dipped your toes in longer form racing, strongman in Japan, I think in '97, and I think you smacked out a course record of about 19 minutes or something there. So what was that race? What was that? Was that like a challenge race, or what was the format for that?
Yeah, it was just a standalone race in Japan. And my coach at the time said, if you ever want to get to Japan, this is the way to go as an athlete because it's very expensive to go to Japan. And he said, there's this great race and they'll fly you there. There's no prize money, but they'll fly you there and they'll take good care of you and you'll get a feel for Japan and it'll let you dip your toe into the long course. And I was like, oh, fantastic. And now at the time, I don't think my coach knew the distances. It was 3K swim, 150K bike, and a marathon. And because at that time, Japanese people did not like swimming. They were not great swimmers. Now they're incredible swimmers. And so I went, it was 1997. And my coach, I got there and I said, it's a marathon, right? And I didn't know it was a marathon. And my longest run was 2 hours. And my longest bike was 3 hours, which is not enough for a race like that. And I get there, but I had just done short course for up till then. So all I knew was go as hard as you can for 40K, run as fast as you can for 10K. So I got there and the people that were racing, the person who had won the year previous, on the Thursday before the Saturday race, she went out for a half marathon. She ran out and ran 21K. And I thought to myself, I'm dead. If she's going out for a 21K 2 days before the race, I did 121K before this race weeks ago, I'm dead. And so anyways, we got into the race and I had a great swim and I was at the front of the bike and I just, there's no power meters, no watts. I just said, okay, well, just go one gear easier than you would if it was 40K. And that's the strategy. That's it. And so I rode and I thought, this doesn't feel too hard. This doesn't feel too hard. And then I got onto the marathon and just ran. And, everyone had told me, oh, you're going to get to like 30 kilometers and you're just going to fall asleep under a table. It's natural. Don't worry about it. And I was like, okay. And I got to 30K and I, passed the aid station. I'm like, okay, I'm not ready to fall asleep under a table. I'll keep running. And, that was it. Like it was so new to me. I was such a rookie and it was like the greatest day ever. So it felt so easy because I'd come from such short, fast work. Of course it wasn't easy, but I was, over the moon.
Yeah. Thing is, Lisa, it's guys like Cameron and I that fall asleep under the table at 30, 32 Ks. That's how it works. It's not people like you. But Ironman Canada. Which Ironman Canada is a race that New Zealanders really enjoy. We've a lot of our guys and girls have gone over there and had success here. So that was your Ironman debut, official Ironman debut. But I mean, you didn't just have a good day out. It was, I think, at that time was the second fastest Ironman debut for a woman, a 9:29. I think you smacked out. And Coming second behind Natasha Badman,
Yeah.
that's a pretty good day. That's a pretty
Yeah.
good day.
It was great. I mean, I just loved it. I love the idea of racing all day long. The way that you have to problem solve, and you've got to come out of the valleys of where you feel like you want to quit. Like there's just so much involved with the day. So I really loved it. And that was a really hard race. I learned a very important lesson that you don't run too fast in the beginning of the marathon. I had no idea of pace. Even though I'd run Strongman Japan, I think it was different because, it didn't have the same level of competition at it, perhaps. But, and it was just so unknown. But at Ironman Canada, now I was getting off the bike with Lori Bowden, who she hadn't won an Ironman at that stage in her career. And she was just my local person I raced with. And she never beat me in a local race. So I was like, we're together. And I was like, I'm out of here. Like I just ran as hard as I could out of transition, whereas she did Ironman all the time. But I was more caught up in the fact that I can't let Lori beat me. And so out I ran, and I think I ran, a 1:20 half marathon, which is too fast. And then on the way back, I ran a 1:40. I was like, oh my gosh. So it was a good learning curve. And then from there, I learned that, you have to go out running, no faster than 4:20 kilometers. Like you're not going out at 4-minute kilometers anymore. And so then I learned how to run a 3-hour marathon, and by pacing it and being able to talk for the first half.
How close did Lori get to you in the end there?
Lori won. I don't know the time differential, but Lori won the race. That was her first Ironman win ever. And then, of course, she went on to win Hawaii and everything else repeatedly.
Oh, so Natasha Badman wasn't the winner that day? Have I got that wrong?
No, Natasha didn't win, but I think the reference is that she had the fastest debut. Natasha had the fastest debut, and I had the second fastest debut, but we weren't in the same race.
Right.
What was it? I mean, your background as an educator, reading your bio, your mathematics, I think, was part of your degree and your education. So you must really have enjoyed through your career. You're talking about analysing the day and problem solving. I mean, that's right in your wheelhouse, isn't it, Lisa?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I still believe that the best problem solver wins. And, deconstructing the day into very tiny little chunks and sort of just nipping away at it bit by bit. You're not swimming 3.8K, biking 180, running 42. You're like swimming from here to there, going from there to there. You're biking from here to there. You can't look at the big problem. You have to just look at little bite-sized bits. So I did that all the time. So definitely my math skills, the analytical skills helped, although I'm not really data driven. So I'm not somebody who's always looking at pace and watch and all that kind of stuff, or wattage even. Like it still for me was very much about perceived effort. When I went on to have success, I mean, I learned how to run a marathon. Yes, I was looking at my watch, but I was also saying, if I can talk, if I can smile, I know I'm running the right pace. If I'm gritting my teeth the first 10K, too fast. Like it's too much. So yeah, the math definitely helps. It helps me calculate. Is it 42 kilometers or 46 kilometers or 38 kilometers?
Yeah. And I mean, look, you straight away went to Kona on the back of that. And we'll talk about Kona a little bit later on, because your career there is a fascinating story in itself, I guess, the trajectory of it. But 1999, you came to New Zealand, and the event, as we said before, shifted to Taupo for the first time from its Auckland base. What prompted the decision to come and race here?
It was because there was an early season race, so it would give me an opportunity to race and
qualify early.
Yeah. So I like the idea of that. And I think that really was all that summed it up, like a great race experience. And so when I came, that was actually, again, a springboard to me resigning from teaching, because I trained through the winter in Canada, which meant 5 and 6 hour indoor bike rides, running in winter and, minus 20 degrees. And I came to the race, and I ran, I believe, around a 3-hour marathon. So I nailed that, had a good swim, but my bike was off. And I realized at that stage that to race at this level, you can't ride inside for 3 months. You have to actually put some miles in on the ground. And while I am a big believer that indoor bike training is a wonderful way to train, at the level of elite athletics, you have to have some on the road miles. And then that was the big change for the following year, was I ended up going to Australia for 6 weeks to train. So I, took the indoor bike training that I had to do in November, December, and then in January, February, went to Australia and trained out on the roads. And I remember going to that training camp with other athletes, and I was like, this is how people win races. Like, I'm in a great environment. It's warm. I'm training with people. Like, up until that stage, I trained completely by myself. Now I'm swimming with people, running with people, biking with people. It's felt so easy, but difficult, like easy, hard. I was working hard, but I didn't have that extra mental energy of figuring out pace or anything. I just went with it. And I remember lining up for Ironman New Zealand, not with an egotistical attitude, but I just said to myself, you've done everything you can to put yourself in a position to win a race. You might not win it, but now you've tasted what it feels like to really train like a full-time athlete by being with other people and being in a good training environment.
Did it give you a deeper love of the sport as well, that social aspect of it? Not something that you necessarily planned, but it just changed your perception and how you operated, and maybe kept you in the sport for what became a golden period for you.
It was wonderful. I mean, it was a new experience. Again, I wasn't raised as a child to leave home. I was raised to be part of my home, my family. And so sport wasn't in the cards when I was born and a teenager. And so now I was leaving home to go train in a foreign country. So it was hard, very, very hard for me. There were a lot of tears. I wanted to go home. I was way, way out of my comfort zone. And mom and dad weren't there to protect me. I was on my own. And so I learned a lot, and I matured a lot as a human being and as a person, as an independent woman. And so it was, every single adventure every single opportunity or thing I did was such a learning for me. And I got to take that into my career, really. If I've learned anything from my career, is that getting out of your comfort zone is where the fulfillment is. And do something that scares you, because I have to say, everything I did scared me. It was, it's never easy to jump into the ocean with 3,000 people.
What was your family's reaction, Lisa, when you decided to become a full-time athlete? Did your family and friends have a reaction to that? Did they tell you were crazy, or did they just support you unconditionally?
Oh, my family told me I was crazy, 100%. Yeah, they were like, how can you leave teaching? Teaching is the kind of career where you change lives and where you make good money, where you have a pension, where you have a health care, stipend. How can you do that? And you're leaving your family and you're traveling. Like, there was not the support that you would think. And my mom actually mentioned it a few days ago. She's like, your dad and I, we did not like that you did that. And we thought you were ruining your body and setting yourself up for not being healthy. And it was, my sister said to them, Mom and Dad, you should probably come see a race and see that Lisa's actually in pretty good shape. Like, it's okay. And as much as I told my parents, I would be in trouble if I didn't train. If I went and did these races, just like from the couch to the finish line, yeah, I'd be in a lot of trouble. I'd be injured. I'd be like crawling. I said, but I actually work at it and I train at it. So yeah, not a huge amount of support, to be honest, but did it anyway, I guess.
Well, do you know what? You're not alone in that. Other people we've spoken to tell different but similar stories.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's an interesting career direction, I guess, and hard for those that don't have a love of Ironman to kind of, it's so far out there for so many of them, I guess. You had that podium in 1999 in the pouring rain, Melissa Spooner and Karen Balance finishing in front of you, and that's the start of a great rivalry. You come back a year later, and this is the first time I went to Ironman New Zealand in 2000. and the temperatures are in the mid-30s. It's insane. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe what I'm seeing. And I see this wonderful scrap unfold between yourself, Karen, and Robin Rookie from Australia, who finished third that day. What are your memories of that day and your first victory in Taupo?
Yeah, great memories. I mean, I remember it might have been 30 on the run, but it was 5 degrees Celsius when we got out of the swim. And I remember being so
Yeah.
cold and couldn't eat my power bars because they were frozen. And and then it got so warm. But my memories really were focusing on process, getting through the swim and the bike, and really the person I was watching was Shawn Welsh. She was the American and was
Yeah.
the favorite to win. And so all my preparation had been about catching Shawn Welsh. And I would say my best part of my game was my mental preparation, visualizing everything. Like I had this race mapped out. And my visualization was that I was going to pass Shawn Welsh at 40K. Like that was my dream. And I would win the
Yeah.
race. That was my visual. And Shawn Welsh dropped out. And I was like, what do I do now? And so I get onto the marathon, and I'm not really sure where I started, maybe fourth or fifth on the run. And I believe Robin was leading, Karen Balance was there. And I moved into the lead at about 20K, 21K. And I thought, what do I do now? Like I wasn't supposed to pass Shawn Welsh till 40K, and I only have 2K to keep running. Now I've got 20K to keep running. And so I remember just how strongly attached I was to that visualization, and that's the power of the mind. And so I was running, and I just kept saying, okay, just take care of business, like nutrition. You don't have to do anything. All you have to do is keep this pace and make sure you get water, make sure you get your gels in, and get to that finish line. That is the only thing. And I just kept focusing on that, and then got to the finish line. And probably one of the greatest memories of the day, which you may not even know, was that I got handed the Canadian flag at the finish line. And the person that handed me that Canadian flag, I didn't know him at the time. His name was David Cracknell, and he was a Canadian living in New Zealand, teaching at St. Kentigern's. And he knew a Canadian was going to cross the finish line, or he speculated, so he rounded up a Canadian flag. He handed it to me. I crossed the finish line with it. It was on the cover of magazines and in the ESPN show. Gave it back to him, didn't think a thing of it. Well, 3 years later, he moved home from New Zealand. Turns out his home was 5 kilometers from my home. Turns out somehow I had his bike box in my garage. And then turns out we become best friends and get married. So
Fantastic.
2000,
serious?
I'm dead serious. He's downstairs. So Ironman New Zealand 2000 was a victory in many, many ways.
It's a major victory.
That's an incredible story.
That's the best story you've heard yet.
By a long way, yeah.
Well, it's a good thing you didn't DNF, or get a puncture, or Karen was about 9 minutes behind you, I think, that day. I'm glad. I'm so glad.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So when you got handed the flag, did you sort of look at him and think, well, he looks okay, or was it just like, woohoo, there's a flag?
I don't remember at all. All I remember is I had to carry that flag for 400 meters, and my arms were really tired. But yeah, nothing evolved from that. But yeah, the few years later, 3 or 4 years later, it was the magic happened. So New Zealand is a very special place for sure.
Yeah, well, of course, you came back a year later.
Breaking up a bit there, Brian.
I always remember the press conference after the 2000 race. Because,
sorry, Brian, you just want to repeat that? We lost you for a second there.
Yeah, I always remember the press conference after the 2000 race. Yourself and Robin were, kind of high on life, and as you would be, a win and a podium. Karen Balance, not so. She was sort of like wondering, why am I doing this strange sport? Wind the clock forward to 2001, and it's another great scrap between yourself and Karen again. How was and you go back to back. So how was that race different from a year previous?
I don't remember that race as much. The biggest thing I remember about that race is crossing the finish line and thinking that I needed more than a win. and that was sort of the turning point with CF, was realizing that I had to have a bit more purpose.
Yeah.
We all have a purpose in life, and I felt like my purpose was more than just crossing finish lines. And so that's what I take away from 2001. I think I remember being not as fast. It was, just not as euphoric, certainly, as the first win. And I thought there has to be more to this than just the medal. So in that sense,
Yeah.
it was a big turning point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you have any pressure on yourself, or did you put pressure on yourself leading into 2001, trying to go back and defend your title?
I'm sure I did, which is probably what took some of the joy away. And again, what I learned as time went on is that, if I wished for no pressure, you'd be wishing for no success. I mean, there was only pressure because there had been success. And so it seems silly to wish for no pressure, because then you're wishing for no success, which is what you work for. And so I kind of just changed it and thought, people aren't putting pressure on you. They just wish you well. Like they want you to win. And, I remember one year going to Ironman Canada, and there was massive, massive pressure for me to win. Everyone wanted me to win the race. I was the Canadian. I had now been winning races, and I came in second. And there were people, like little girls, crying. Oh my God. Like, I thought Lisa was supposed to win. They were devastated. And I remember thinking to myself, like trying to explain to them, today's second is a win. That's the way it is. I didn't quit. I got to the finish line. A better person beat me. I couldn't beat them today. And today, second is a win. And so I tried, and that was when I realized that this, little girl crying or other people in shock, they weren't putting pressure on me. They really just really wanted me to win. And I kind of reframed pressure into just people really supporting me and wishing me well. And so I took that into every race.
We didn't have you in New Zealand in 2002 for the race that year, which Karen eventually got her win in a very good field. You had victory in Ironman Australia. You had a wonderful string of victories that sort of followed in Australia and, of course, in Canada. We got you back in New Zealand in 2003, and that was an absolute belter of a race. Very fast. Both you and Karen Balance absolutely turned Joanna Lawn inside out for her to get her maiden run, her maiden win. That was a very, very fast race that day, a third place finish for you. Any recollections of that day?
You've got the results in front of you. I thought I raced there in 2002 and came in third in 2002. But I may be wrong, but I thought I went there in 2002. In my memory, maybe you can look it up, and I came in third. But I remember that the takeaway from that was that I wasn't sore. That I was like, I'm bouncing out of bed the next day. So I think I've sort of hit that level in racing where I can bounce back quickly. And then a few weeks later, I went to Ironman Australia and won. And so that was like a turning point where now I had enough resiliency and miles in my leg that I could go back to back with different races. So then I started going to Australia and finding some success there.
Yeah. No, I'm just looking at 02, and I don't really want to share the results with you because you don't feature in top 5 there, Lisa. I think there seemed to be a 1 year gap. Yeah, so 03 you were definitely there for a third.
Did I come in third?
In 03.
Was it
in 03
2003
you did,
I came in third? Okay, so that was the year.
Yeah,
so I've missed a year in my whole brain. And went to Australia. I know there was a year I was going to do an Ironman Arizona, and it might have been 02.
Right.
And they changed the bike course to be loops. And I thought, there's no way I want to go to Ironman Arizona and do loops because people will just draft. And I won't draft, and I'll end up being 20 minutes behind. So I think I pivoted and did Australia. And then maybe the next year I came and did New Zealand and Australia. I thought it was consecutive. But that 2003 then, that was the year I came in third and sort of bounced out of bed the next day and was like, oh yeah, I think I could do Ironman Australia in a few weeks. So that was the big push to that race.
Yeah, you had great
'Cause
success in Australia over a long stretch. That was a course that you clearly loved.
I did. I loved it, and I loved the people, very much like New Zealand. Loved the
Yeah,
people, loved the course. And that's the wonderful thing about both New Zealand and Australia is you feel like you would just be
yeah,
taken into
yeah.
somebody's house and made to feel comfortable. And that's why I kept coming back, to be honest. I mean, New Zealand had that for me in those years, and then Australia became sort of similar. And I think a lot of that was because I had to go to these races on my own, and I wanted to be happy. So I'd seek out people, seek out friends, and make friends and get into a routine. And then, of course, I just wanted to keep going back year after year.
Mm, mm.
what was the initial attraction for you to come to New Zealand, Lisa? Was it because, I mean, obviously weren't as many races around in those days. It just worked out for your schedule. You were saying earlier it sort of worked for the schedule to get an Ironman race out of the way early. Is that really how it lined up for you?
Yeah, again, there weren't very many races. So I think if you wanted to have a couple of races a year, then you needed to travel. And so the timing looked pretty nice to get in a race in March, which it was at that time. And of course, I loved New Zealand from having been there to Wellington for the World Championships. And so, yeah, it worked out. And, Canadians had been going and racing there. Melissa Spooner was going. So it felt like I was going to be able to bring a little bit of Canada to New Zealand.
Mm, mm. Because one of the features on your CV, it's interesting. You've sort of got this North America, Oceania racing out here. Not so much in Europe. You had a win in Germany in 05. So was essentially just about the timing that kept you away from Europe?
Yeah, the timing was good. And I did need to race Ironman Canada when I got to be sponsored by Subaru, which was the title sponsor. So that race was in August.
Right. Yeah.
And certainly
Yeah.
an European Ironman would have been in July. And again, there really weren't
Yeah.
that many. I think you just had Ironman Germany, which is in Frankfurt. I had done Roth back when it was an Ironman. So in the year 2000, that was Ironman Europe. So I did that in, I believe, 2000, maybe 2001, although don't seem to be that great with my dates. But then it stopped being an Ironman and became a challenge race. But that was one of my first European Ironmans.
This is the voice of Ironman, Mike Riley, and this is another edition of the Old School Try Show with my Kiwi mates Cameron Harper and Brian Ashby.
Well, astute viewers of our podcast on YouTube will kind of be figuring out that, there's a pretty big edit going on here in this chat with Lisa Bentley. And there's a bit of a reason for that. You were chatting on the phone to us last time, Lisa, and because you were dealing with a really big power cut there. What was going on?
Yeah, I don't know what it was, but something in our neighborhood just cut the power for about 4 hours. So lost it all, and I kept trying to plug my phone in because my phone was dying during our interview. And of course, I'm thinking, oh, these plugs don't work. Well, of course they don't work because there's no electricity.
Did you eventually sort of you and your partner, you and your husband, get to have some dinner that night, cook dinner, or was it?
We
some
walked
coloured
we
beef in
walked
the
our
fridge?
dog and thought if the power's not on when we get home, then we
Yeah.
have to get to the grocery store and get some sushi or whatever. And I ate cold beans, and then at 8 p.m. it came back on so I could put some things in the microwave and eat a bit more.
Fantastic. Well, it's good to have you back, and I'm glad you came back and joining us again because just a couple of things that we wanted to finish up with, and one of your Kona career, the wonderful success that you had around the world with your 11 Ironman wins, but you were so consistent over the years at Kona with top 10 finishes, and you rounded out your career with the podium as well. So just tell us about Kona and how your body responded with CF and all of those things, the heat and those things, because you were so consistent. But I guess it was always a holy grail. Everyone wants to get that top spot.
Mm. I mean, the course suited me quite a bit. I mean, it's not a technical course on the bike. Basically, go out, turn around, come back. It really spoke to my strengths of, sort of pushing into wind. And I mean, probably the only challenging part on that bike course was holding on when the wind was really blowing. But as my career went on, I spent quite a bit of time on the island training. I would go there to train for about 3 or 4 weeks prior to the race. And that really elevated my game, because now I had ridden all those roads and, with cars on them, and I really got a feel for where the wind was. So now when I race, I could anticipate, hold on to your bike here. So it wasn't a big shock to me. Now, all that said, I think I have a good dose of PTSD now when I go to the island, because I know where there should be wind. And there seems to be much less wind these days, to be honest. But anyway, so I spent a lot of time there in preparation to get acclimatized. Given that I have cystic fibrosis, one of the parts of CF is that you sweat out a lot of sodium. So ironically, I had success there, but I also had a lot of tears and misery, because in my early years, I didn't really know how to manage it. So in my early years there, I didn't know that you could replace your sodium with anything other than electrolyte drink. So that led to a lot of cramping and crying and my body shutting down, and almost going to hospital after the race, to learning and understanding how much sodium I sweat out per hour, that I can't replace it all, but I can replace a lot of it. And the other side of the equation is I have to be really acclimatized. The more acclimatized you are, the less sodium you'll sweat out. So for someone like myself with cystic fibrosis, we found that I sweat about 2,000 milligrams of sodium per hour. And that's like at 70 degrees, like that's for an hour. So given the heat there and the intensity, I'm probably sweating out way more than that. And 2,000 milligrams, a standard salt pill is about 300. So you can imagine that on paper, I would need like 6 salt pills an hour, but you can't take that in because you need the fluid. And that would mean I'd be drinking, 3 big water bottles per hour. So it's impossible. So the only thing that brought it into a realm of possibility really was to acclimatize properly. And I did that by going to the island 4 weeks early, training my body to sweat out less salt. Then on race day, taking in as much sodium as I could, which for me, I problem solved it. And I figured I could handle about 4 salt pills per hour on the bike, because you can get enough fluid in. And then on the run, I would take 3 salt pills an hour, because there's a little bit less fluid coming in. And that was a sweet spot for me. So I had to learn a lot. And I don't think I ever had the perfect race in Kona, which I found exciting because I could always improve and learn. And I had a lot of great days there, but I loved the heat. Like I would choose heat over cold any day. If you look at the races I've chosen, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, those were all warm races. And so it was a good climate for me. I loved the island. I loved having the best competition. I loved swimming in the ocean, the aquarium. I hated the run course. It was a hard run course, but that was good for me. And I always finished the race thinking I can improve, I can do better. And when you have that kind of feeling, you keep going back to the office. And so Kona provided that for me. It provided a challenge. And so I did keep going back. And one of the reasons I stopped going back really was I knew what it took to be successful there, which for me was going early, going weeks early, and basically being absorbed by the environment. And I got to the stage in my career that I didn't want to. I didn't want to leave home. I didn't want to leave my family for a month anymore to go to prepare for this race. And that really was the big turning point, as well as, injuries that wouldn't allow me to do the training that I needed to do. But my goal in Hawaii was always to perform. And I was really happy I was able to perform most years, for sure.
Yeah. So, Lisa, as you got towards the end of your career, and you kind of touched on it just then, was it just that you just didn't have the same motivation? You didn't, you were just like, what, I can't prepare as well as I'd like to be able to perform at the highest level. What was the mindset as you went towards the end of your career and through to retirement?
Yeah, I think that certainly injury is a big part. And anyone who's ever been in pain knows that is just so draining to be in pain. When you're in no pain, you can just go and perform, and you're 100% focused on how can I get myself to be the best that I can be. And when you're carrying around a little niggle or injury, 30% of your time might be spent at physio or spent trying to manage, not improve, trying to manage. And as my career went on, I started to get injuries like that. Now, at this stage, 2007 was my last Hawaii Ironman, I believe, and and I was 39 years old. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking I've had a great career. There's nothing else that I want to do. I want to win Hawaii. But at that stage now, I was just trying to run healthy. And running healthy, once I got into 2007, was about running 3 days a week. And in the prime of my career, I was running probably 7 days a week. I was doing double run days. I was, training for performance. And when I hit 2007, now I was training to not get injured. And so for me, I found that I could get away with it with 70.3. And so I made that commitment to myself that, I'm just going to, I'm going to ride this as long as I can. I absolutely love what I do, but I don't want to go to Hawaii and walk a marathon. And I cannot do those long, I cannot do 3-hour runs anymore. Or I'm going to, just continue this roller coaster of acupuncture, injections, hyperbaric chamber. I mean, that's what I was doing. And so that, that really was a big part of the decision. So I was grateful that Ironman created the Ironman 70.3 races, because it kind of it brought me another 2 years in my career where I could get away with 3 runs a week and still perform at a decent level.
Well, at a decent level, you're sort of understating it a wee bit, because you had, I think, a second at the World 70.3, and I think maybe finishing up in Kona with a third after just steadily moving up, which is just stunning. It's wonderful, particularly at that end of the career and everything you were dealing with. It sounds as though 2005 was just horrendous in Kona, and I've been through this myself, but in a whole different way. A burst appendix.
Well, 2005 was interesting, and at the time, I don't think I realized what was going on because I was in it. And I did Ironman Frankfurt in July, late or very early July, and I finished the race and then flew home, and I didn't feel well. And, I had a pain in my side in July, and I thought, this isn't good. And we went to the hospital, and they were just going to take my appendix out. And I'm like, whoa, can't you do a test? Like, isn't there some kind of diagnostics? And they're like, nope, we just take it out. And I'm like, I'm an athlete. I can't just take it out. And I said, I just flew across the Atlantic. I did an Ironman 2 days ago. Maybe I'm just exhausted, give me some time. So I came out of it. I was fine. So that was July. And then it just seemed like there was one thing on top of the other, which I kind of forgot until I looked through my journal and saw that I had like a tooth that had to get pulled. It was an infection in my mouth. Like there was all these little warning signs of like, you're sick. There's something wrong with you. There's something going on. And I was just kind of like, the World Championships is coming. I've got to be ready for the World Championships. And, I was getting through my training fine, but I'm getting teeth pulled and I'm on antibiotics for my teeth. I've got this side thing that keeps coming up on and off. And then I get to Hawaii and I'm nailing my training. I'm there a month beforehand, nailing my training. And sort of the day after my peaking workout was to run 2 hours at 4-minute kilometers. I would do that 2 weeks out from the race on the Queen K. And I nailed it. I'm like, fantastic. And then the next day I went out for dinner and threw up. And it's like, what's wrong with me? And it was, my side hurts. Like, what's wrong? And my side was hurting. And, I'm getting some different, people that I knew saying, I don't think it's your appendix. You'd be in terrible, terrible pain if it was your appendix. And I'm like, I just don't feel good. And it kind of subsided. And then it came back. So I'm in my taper at this stage. And then Tuesday before the race was in terrible pain. And I thought if I could just get some muscle relaxants, like I'm sure it's nothing. And again, like for people listening would be thinking, even myself saying it, like stop. But
yeah.
But like, the pain threshold is through the roof. Yeah. And all I want to do is race. Like this is the race. Yeah. And I went to see a doctor, Dr. Hiller, that is in Kona. And he said, I'm going to send you to a friend of mine. Just said a friend. And off I go to the friend, and it says surgeon. I'm like, what? And saw him Thursday before the race. And he said, I think you have appendicitis or diverticulitis. And I'm going to send you for a CAT scan. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I said, I got the world championships in 36 hours. I said, if it is, am I going to hurt myself by racing? And he's like, are you crazy? He says, you've got a temperature of 103. And I'm like, can I just do the race? Like, I can handle a sore side. I can handle this. And he's like, I'm going to put you on antibiotics so you don't kill yourself. I'm going to put you on antibiotics, but you have to come back on Sunday. So go race. You're not going to do very good, but go off, do your race, and then I need you to come back Sunday for CAT scan. And so off I went. I get on the antibiotics, and of course I start to feel a bit better, and the pain is gone. But I'm saying to my husband, I feel better. And meanwhile, like the sheets are soaked, I'm sweating all night. And I said, I think I'm going to really have a great race. And he, didn't say much at the time, but I think he was shaking his head. And off I went and raced, and got through the swim and the bike. And I had a good swim and I had a good bike, but nothing that reflected where I was at. Like, I was in the shape of my life. But I was fine. And then I got on the run, and typically when I would race, I'd have to hold myself back. Like, I'd go out too fast, and I'd be like, okay, hold back. Let's get back to 4:15 kilometers. But on this day, no, I was 5-minute kilometers. And I'm like, that's not normal. Like, normally I'm trying to hold back. And I remember trying to take a gel, and it tasted terrible. And then I get to about 9 miles in the marathon, and I'm kind of limping. And my husband saw me, and he said, I'm going to give her 1 more mile, and I'm not letting her go on the Queen K if she looks like that, because she won't stop. And she'll be like passed out in the energy lab. So I got onto the Queen K, and he basically touched me and disqualified me. And then I was out.
Yeah.
And then the next day I went to the doctor and had a CAT scan, and really I didn't feel bad at all. And my husband Dave was like, you better act a little sick, or they're never going to give you a CAT scan. And so they had the CAT scan, and it had already burst, which is why I didn't feel bad, because the pressure was off. But it was contained. It wasn't deadly or anything. So anyway, that was the appendix story. And so that was 2005. So it was a rough one. But then, 2006 was a great year. And, there's always, when you're in a sport for this long, things are going to happen. And so lost my appendix in Hawaii, but it was a good spot to do that.
Yeah. Well, you came back, as I said before, with tremendous results at kind of the next year and 70.3 World Championships. And I guess you're at that point, you're dealing with all those injuries. What ultimately sort of prompted the decision to move on from the sport and say, enough's enough? And I know Scott Tinley's written a wonderful book, I think, Chasing the Sunset, and just making that adjustment as a pro athlete into the post-professional athlete world. What was that like for you?
Yeah, no, I was always preparing to retire from sport. Like, I think even back in the year 2000, I started thinking about it because I wanted to go to the Olympics, and Sydney was 2000. And then I started to find success in Ironman, so I kept going. But I was always building my post-racing career. I did television commentary. I had started coaching and speaking. So I was doing that for a while. So I was excited about life after sport. But the real turning point came when I got quite sick in 2009. And my lung function basically was going down. So I was on like a particular therapy where I would do an inhaled nebulizer morning and night. So here I am at Ironman 70.3 Philippines, the morning of the race, taking an inhaled antibiotic. Like, that's not a way to race.
Yeah.
But that's where I got to in 2009, is I just couldn't get rid of this infection, and I was on antibiotics, and the antibiotic I'm on causes Achilles tendon rupture. And, I had Achilles issues, and I'm doing this inhaled nebulizer 2 times a day for, 40 minutes in the morning, 40 minutes in the afternoon. And on the flight home from Philippines, I started coughing up blood. Like I won Philippines, and then I'm coughing up blood. And that's not untypical in cystic fibrosis. So it's not as devastating as it may sound, but that's serious enough that I need to go to the doctor, and that's serious enough that people are starting to go, what's going on here? And a couple weeks later, I was meant to race Ironman 70.3 Muskoka. And at this time, my lung function had dropped to the 70s, which doesn't sound bad, but that's a decrease of probably a water bottle of oxygen per breath. And so I was in the 70s with my lung function, and the doctor said, you can race. You're not going to go fast. Like it's impossible because you don't have enough oxygen going to your muscles, but you're not in any danger. You just, it's going to be hard. And I really weighed it, and I thought to myself, I've said for a long time that CF is my superpower, and that I want to be an example and bring hope and show people with CF that you can do this. So me not racing is kind of hypocritical. Like, yeah, I'm sick, but you know what? I'm going to be the best sick person I can be. And so I did Ironman 70.3 Muskoka, and it was a struggle. And I've always been someone who raced on perceived effort. And so my perceived effort was right there with with a fast race, but it wasn't fast. But I didn't even know that, because I just raced the way I always raced, which is go as hard as you can. And, apparently, people are watching me start the run and they're like worried. I was in it. I didn't realize how far behind I was, but people were like, what's wrong? And I finished the race, and I was like, I know this is it. Like and it wasn't because I didn't perform. It was because it was so hard. And I just knew that I needed to put my health first and not sport first. And so, I had to go on prednisone, which is obviously a steroid. And so obviously I wasn't going to race. It didn't help, by the way. And it just made me paranoid because it was such an awful drug. But anyway, and then as time went on, like my focus had to now be my therapy. And then a few months later, my lung function dropped to 55%. So at this stage, I was at 1 lung, basically. And then I had to go on intravenous for 5 weeks. So clearly not the setting for performance, but that was okay. And then, really, I still was exercising through all that because I know how beneficial that is. And even when I was in the hospital, like the doctors were wanting to bring me an exercise bike because they wanted me to cough. They wanted me to get better. And I said, oh, don't worry about that. I've just run up and down the stairs for 45 minutes. It's okay. And then, when it was when I got healthier, I then didn't want to be out of breath anymore. It was interesting. Like I spent 20 years racing out of breath. And then when this episode of being unwell went away, I was like, I don't want to be that out of breath ever again. And anyway, so, but at this stage now I'm over 40. I think at this stage I was 42, and, quite content with just trying to be healthy, stay fit, and be retired. So I have enjoyed it. I mean, there's no question that there's nothing like running down a finishing chute with people screaming for you. There is nothing like the buzz of a race. And that's a hard void to fill. But I do fill it. I mean, speaking is the exact same energy for me, to be quite honest. Like getting ready to talk to a group of 200 or 300 people, beforehand. Like I go for a little walk. I'd be careful not to eat too much. And I finish the talk and I'm like flying high and I'm excited, and it's almost as if I've done Ironman. And then it's like I have my post talk food and I'm excited, and I'm just energized. So it's almost the same energy. Same with television commentary. When I do that, I get the same buzz as if I'm racing. And of course, when I'm watching the athletes I coach race, I'm excited for them. and I feel incredible amount of fulfillment. So I've definitely filled the void, but there's, I'm very purpose driven, and so that hasn't changed. And I always want to have impact. So I'm, in that sense, I'm not sitting around waiting for life to happen for me. I'm trying to make life happen for myself.
Lisa, have you always, your attitude is just, I find incredibly invigorating. Have you always been a positive person? I mean, it's amazing. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, but your attitude is incredible. Have you always been that way?
I guess I have. Like, I don't think it's something that I learned to do. I'm blessed. I'm really grateful for things. I guess I've always realized there's a reason for everything that happens, and there's a message in everything. And it's probably the thing that's given me hope. Like, even when something bad happens, I think, well, there's a reason for this, and I don't even know what it is right now, but I can't imagine that it's bad. There's got to be a reason. And yeah, I mean, it just helps me to deal with things, to be honest. And I've always said that your attitude is the most important thing. It's more important than any fact that you face, like anything that comes up. The fact is, I might be sick, but my attitude is, well, I'm going to be the best sick person I can be, because that's my only weapon. It's all I can do. Otherwise, I'm going to be sad. And like, I really hate being sad. And so even when I find myself sad, and I do, trust me, like, I'm not, there's lots of valleys where I can't get out of, but I really try to, write it out, journal, problem solve it, bounce it off people. I have a great support people around me, great friends, my husband, obviously, and my dog's a good therapy person. So anyways, I try, definitely.
Well, Lisa, you've used the line a few times, bringing hope, and look, you're a huge inspiration as an athlete, and now as an author, a public speaker, a coach. You've had a huge part of the chapter in Ironman New Zealand, and it's lovely to see you again after all these years. And one thing that definitely hasn't changed, you've still got that wonderful winning smile. So we're so grateful to have had you joining us in this edition of the Old School Tri Show. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.